I'm Pam. I am a survivor of childhood sexual abuse. I'm a person living with post-traumatic stress disorder, and I'm a badass because I'm a survivor. Today I'm going to talk about flashbacks. And I'm going to talk about flashbacks in two ways. The first is to explain what they are, and the second is to share some tips on how to manage the distress that they can cause. And you may actually find that some of the tips that I share work very well for managing panic attacks or anxiety. So first, in flashbacks. You may have seen flashbacks portrayed in movies or on television. And flashbacks are not like that. At least they're not like that for me. They are not like a snippet of a movie. They are quite different. And the reason why is the way that traumatic memories are stored in the brain. So what happens is, in a time when the mind realizes that you are facing a very serious threat, it starts to store memories differently because of the physiological changes that happen in your body. You kind of go into the fight or flight response. And this causes the memories to be stored in a different way from regular memories. Now, there are two things that happen when that occurs. One is that the memories may become hard to retrieve. They may be fragmented. And then the other thing that is actually really weird is that if you think about the way music is recorded in different tracks, that is how a traumatic memory can be retrieved sometimes. So it basically gets split up, and instead of getting integrated senses when you recover that memory, it can come through as separate tracks of smell or touch or vision, and it's not integrated, and it doesn't always make sense. And the other thing is that sometimes it also feels like it's happening in the present. And I'll kind of give a little bit of a description. When I first was beginning to have symptoms of PTSD, I was having flashbacks, and I really didn't understand it because I didn't know what flashbacks are. I came to learn during a lot of therapy and a lot of discussions with mental health care providers that what was happening to me was that I was having flashbacks, and that my flashbacks are not hallucinations, they're memories. One of the strange things about flashbacks, and this for some reason is particularly common in people who have experienced traumatic events, is the sense of touch, which really includes our entire bodies, often is the way that flashbacks occur. For me, it is the most common way, and it actually has been shown that it's also one of the most reliable ways of being able to tell whether or not the individual is actually experiencing flashbacks. So for me, what they're like is I actually feel the sensation in my body, and sometimes I even feel some movement as a result of something that just is running through my brain. When I first started having flashbacks, one of the things that happened to me is that I had this sensation of being lifted up in my bed. And it was, I was in a child's body. And it felt like it was happening to me at the time that I was having the flashback. It was very strange and disorienting, and it didn't make any sense to me. The other part of flashbacks that can be very unnerving, other than, they kind of suck all on their own, is emotions. So flashbacks can actually be emotional flashbacks. And so for me, one of the things that happened again in the early days of when I was starting to recover my memories and having all of these awful PTSD symptoms, starting up, is that when I would get home from work, I would have this fear, and it didn't make any sense to me. It would continue to build until I went to bed. And by that time I would be, having this fear that made no sense. There was nothing for me to be afraid of. And yet I had this fear. And I came to understand that that's actually a flashback. So it's important to know that flashbacks are memories, and they can be very brief. The visual flashbacks I've had, and it hasn't been a lot, are really almost like a, flicker. And, I begin to question myself whether or not, did that really come to me? So that's the deal with flashbacks. And I think that in addition to the fact that some are emotional, they can also be, they can also cause you to feel like they're happening now, which is tough. And so, one of the key techniques for dealing with them is to actually remind yourself that you are in the present. And so the techniques that are used are very oriented to bringing you into the present. And I'm just going to end by explaining the purpose of flashbacks. So flashbacks are theorized to be part of your brain's process to recover from the trauma. I remember I was having a really tough time. I was having flashbacks. My body flashbacks are kind of horrific because they linked to graphic sexual acts. And when they hit, it's really hard. I'm almost 3 years into my recovery, and it's still really hard to deal with them when they hit me. But the therapist reminded me that it is both a vote of confidence. Your mind is saying, hey, you're strong enough now. You can handle this. And, the other part is that we need to process the emotions that happen to us. And so the flashbacks are the way of doing that. They're not our minds, throwing up some of the worst stuff that's happened to us. They're actually a way of our mind processing the dreadful things that happened. So I'm going to end here. I'm going to do a part 2 on techniques to manage anxiety associated with flashbacks or just plain old panic attacks. Okay? I will talk to you soon.